Good morning, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. My name is Samuel Ajiman. I'll be hosting the program. I think I have some time, so I'll request that we introduce ourselves, and then we get to know why we are here. And then I think the order of, or the business of the day will commence right from there. I would request that you mention your name and the institution you are representing or coming from. Again, let me hint that I announced earlier that breakfast is served. You can help yourself. Just get the beverage or the snacks and come to the table, and then we can still continue the program whilst you have breakfast. Let me start with the lady on my right-hand side. So one after the other, we introduce ourselves, and I've started already. My name is Sami.
My name is Zenobia Belly, representing Arusha, Ghana.
Good.
Okay. Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
I am Iraja Labi, Arusha, Ghana.
Arusha, good.
Africa Policy.
Stacey El Silamte, Africa Center for Energy Policy.
David Nyante, Ghana Institution of Engineering.
Jennifer Mensah, representing Shark Express.
Anthony Owuswanson, Shark Express.
Andrew Boma, sorry, from the Swiss Embassy.
Shadrach Swifi, TV3.
Eric Mensah, 3news.com, subsidiary of Media General.
Okay. Joel Asante, GCIC.
Daniel Keno, Daily Graphic.
Kojo Intrakwa & Co.
Randolph Seika, Divine Group International.
Linda Abafoli, Embassy of Denmark.
Rebecca Edinam Gidgasu, AB Farms Limited.
Stephanie Youngson, Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources.
Vanessa Alabi, Kimati and Partners.
Solange Geda Ama Igalitilo.
Anapokada Zabra, FAMU.
Bobby Jesse, SGA Farms.
Hendrik Jumovensa, Ministry of Finance.
Nane Fredi of Oyata, Customs Brokers.
Senior.
Hello, all right, Stephen Annan, GCIC.
Dramani Bukari, GCIC.
Thank you, Doctor. I think you are the last one for now. The rest, when they join us, we will definitely introduce them. So we're here, a very important assignment this morning. We want to understand some of the barriers that are impeding the environment, the enabling environment that we all want to create for climate smart enterprises. And quite a number of us, I recognize all our institutions were here just last week when we talked about the energy transition agenda and the opportunities that it presents and all of that. And climate smart enterprises or small and medium enterprises that are involved in climate smart businesses are very key in that direction. Not just that, also in ensuring that we have very secured or food security, secured environment for our foods and all of that. So very, very important subject we have. I will not take it out of the mouth of the IMANI themselves, who are putting this together with the Ghana Climate Innovation Center, to let us know and understand our presence here and what the objective is that we are setting for ourselves in the next couple of hours and how we intend to achieve them. Let's put our hands together. Welcome Mr. Amprofi Ajiman with IMANI, Senior Associate.
Thank you, Mr. Ajimai. Good morning again and welcome. We are so privileged to have you join us today. This has been a very, very important collaboration that we've had with GCIC, and over the last couple of months, probably 3 or 4, we have in a whole looked at how climate smart businesses can thrive in Ghana. We have touched on some regulatory issues, some fiscal issues as well, and we've seen how policy constraints can actually affect climate smart businesses. In this last installment, well, the last installment of the first phase of our collaboration with GCIC, we are going to look at how we can identify how some enablers and barriers to how climate smart businesses can thrive. We can look at that, address that, and see some interventions that we can have. And then in the second part of the program, we also look at the role of climate smart businesses in actually achieving the nationally determined contributions of the government. What we want to achieve today is to pick on your very, very important ideas, because we believe that as representatives of your various outfits, you would share some insights that we probably are not looking at from the standpoint of IMANI and from GCIC as well. So we thank you for being here. Please, during the Q&A sessions, try as much as possible to contribute very, very important ideas that you may have, so that in issuing our final report, we can include all those ideas in them. So thank you very much. You're most welcome, and I hope you have a fruitful day. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ajima. Let's put our hands together for him once again, please. I don't know whether we have a problem with the energy to clap. I will emphasize again that there is lunch after everything, and there is breakfast. Both are served. Now, for the lunch, we'll reserve it after the program. But for breakfast, currently, that is what you need to have. If you don't have the energy to clap nor contribute, Mr. Ajiman has said it, we are going to need your input. That energy ought to be there. Please go to the table, get some snacks, get some beverage, and come. Dr. Bukari and the team are ready. There's going to be a lot of discussions, and we need your energy. Let's put our hands together once again for Mr. Amprofi Ajiman. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we're going to have a presentation on the theme or the subject for this morning, understanding the barriers to an enabling business environment for climate smart enterprises in this country. We shall invite Mr. Dennis Asari, who is a senior associate with IMANI, to help us with that presentation. Another big round of applause for Mr. Asari, please.
Hi, good morning. I think the energy is really low. Good morning. Thank you very much for taking time from your busy schedules to join us. And as my colleague Amprofi mentioned, it's been a very interesting journey partnering with GCIC to critically look at how we can push policy support for climate smart businesses, understanding or recognizing the role they play in achieving Ghana's bigger climate action goals. It is also imperative to also know that while these businesses are coming up, we create the supportive environment to help them scale up so that they can meaningfully contribute to achieving Ghana's NDCs. And since last year, we focus on a lot of topics or conversations that are critical to scaling up climate smart enterprises. So we started with looking at how we can use fiscal policies to address some of the constraints that green businesses face in Ghana. Then we also highlighted the important role that women play in the green business sector, given that they constitute a greater proportion of the SME market. Even within the green space, there are a lot of innovations that are being led by women, but sometimes the barriers in the brown economy are filtering into the green economy, and so it is imperative that we understand the key role that women-led businesses play in accelerating our climate actions and understand how we can create a more supportive environment for women. Today, what we are doing is to critically look at understanding the work that green businesses do, why it is important to create a supportive environment for them, and recognize the key role they play in achieving Ghana's climate goals. Together, all of this work that we have done under the PAGE program of GCIC is to create some policy support and advocacy, to create some room for green businesses, to create the jobs, to bring out the innovation, as well as meaningfully contribute to our broader climate action. And so what we are currently going to do is to look at what are the enablers and the barriers to green business scaling up. What are the key constraints, and also what are the present supportive factors that we can accelerate to help them meaningfully scale up their innovations. So to do that, I'll just do a brief context on Ghana's green businesses as well as climate change and development. Broadly look at the context of climate change and why green businesses are very important for that conversation. The objectives for what we are doing with GCIC, which I've already mentioned a few things, as well as the purpose of this paper that we are doing with GCIC. The approach that we took, then through that, we look at the key differences between green businesses and traditional SMEs. And this was very important because we see that there's a lot of conversations about green businesses, but one of the key questions people ask is that, how different are these businesses from traditional SMEs? Why should we create a separate environment, or why should we create some policy support or some set of policies and regulations just to help them scale up? Are they not like the ordinary traditional businesses? What are the key differences between them? Then we look at what are the risks associated with running even green, or what are some of the issues associated with companies trying to integrate green solutions in their operations, and they need to create that enabling environment for them. Then we look at the drivers and enablers, the barriers, and also highlight some of the experiences green businesses have had within the current investment or business climate. Then we look at the way forward and policy recommendations. To set a bit much of a global context, we see that climate change is one of the major risks that we face. It is a critical challenge that is affecting every fabric of our life, from economy, business, food security, and every aspect of our life. And so it has become a key issue for countries to understand how to address them, particularly because it is affecting how countries grow, it is affecting livelihood and pushing more people into poverty. And so it has become very imperative for countries to understand how they consume and produce energy and how that contributes to climate change. But the context I want to set is that the current efforts that we are putting in to address climate change are not actually getting us to where we want to be. And so if you look at the first picture, that's the one on your left, what you see is that all the policies, targets, pledges, and also scenarios that countries have set for themselves, even if we put all of that together, we'll still not be able to achieve the targets we have set for ourselves in the Paris Agreement. So after we set the after the Paris Agreement, countries have made a lot of pledges, have made a lot of targets, or set a lot of targets for themselves on how they want to address climate change. But if you look at the pace at which emissions are growing, what we have seen is that even if, and if you look at the recent IPCC report, what they are saying is that even if all countries are to achieve their nationally determined contributions, we'll still not be able to achieve the target we've set for ourselves of reducing the global climate to below 1.5 degrees Celsius. That means that the current efforts that we are putting in place to address climate change are not ambitious enough. They are not very well targeted to critically bring us to the level where we want to be. And that requires countries to put in a lot more effort, to be more even ambitious on how they address climate change. And a major driver of climate change is greenhouse gas emission, and that is mainly driven by the energy sector. And so the energy sector, that is the way we produce and consume energy, is critically driving climate change in our world today. And so it has become so important that whatever we do in addressing climate change, we are very cognizant of how it contributes to achieving these global targets. And the key people who hold the solution to these innovations are the green businesses. And that is why this conversation is very, very important. And so green businesses hold the innovation and solutions to reversing this trend and helping us get to our target. But the current policies and targets and national determined contributions that we have set for ourselves, they are not ambitious enough to meet that target. And so it has become imperative for countries to start looking within to find more solutions to addressing climate change. If you bring it to our Ghanaian context, we see a similar trend in Ghana, that over the years, we've seen relatively sustainable growth and development in the last decade. But that growth and development has been accompanied with a very significant increase in greenhouse gas emission. And so what we are seeing is that we are growing and achieving sustainable economic growth and development. But that development, it is not supporting the environment, or it is not contributing to making the environment more sustainable. And so you see, after 2010, we see a significant rise in greenhouse gas emission. But it is within this same period that we've recorded one of our best growth as a country. That means that the way we are growing, it's not protecting the environment. And so it is very important for us to look at how we can identify more green growth potential. What are the opportunities for us to grow while protecting or achieving environmental sustainability? And if you look at the global context that I show, where the energy sector is really driving greenhouse gas emission and climate change, we see the same pattern also in Ghana. That tells us that how we produce and consume energy has become very, very important for us to look at in terms of addressing climate change. Despite all the challenges in terms of how we are growing and the implication on the environment, Ghana has enormous green growth potential. There are a lot of opportunities for us to grow whilst ensuring environmental sustainability. Now, if you look at our current state of energy access, we still have about 5 million people who do not have access to electricity. And about 500,000 out of this will be connected through solar home systems or through mini grids or other renewable energy technologies in extending electricity to the unserved population. That is a green business opportunity available for us in our economy. And so we have an opportunity to expand energy access, but in a more environmentally sustainable way. And if you look at about 2,000 communities within the island areas or island communities within our country, most of these communities will be connected to electricity through renewable energy. And that tells you the kind of business opportunity within the RE sector for green businesses in Ghana. Then again, you see that about in Ghana, Ghana has one of the lowest level of recycling. And that means that less than 5% of our waste is recycled. And so going into the future, as there is a more focus on circular economy, this is a business opportunity for those who are invested in circular economy actions or circular economy solutions. This is another green business opportunity within our context. And if you look at Ghana's climate smart investment plan, extending digital agriculture to the unserved communities could benefit over 120,000 farmers. And if you look at specific sectors, if you take out the financial risk within the market out, if you do an analysis of the impact of aquaculture or doing climate smart aquaculture, that could bring in at least about $30 million into the agri sector. In fact, if you look at climate smart cocoa production alone, that market is estimated to even bring in more than $280 million into the cocoa sector if we explore more climate smart solutions in our cocoa sector. So it tells you that this is just a few of the opportunities within the green economy for Ghana. So there are enormous or compelling green business opportunities in Ghana. However, the challenge is that whilst these opportunities exist and it is creating investment for green businesses in the country, most of these green businesses have not been able to scale up. So the challenge that we have is that most of these businesses are available or they are employing different solutions to address our climate crisis. But most of the green businesses we have in Africa as a whole are unable to scale up. What this picture shows is that if you look at only energy and agriculture sector, most of the green businesses within this space, majority of them are unable to make annual revenue beyond $20 million. That is even on a higher side. If you try to contextualize it within other countries, you see that there are most of the green businesses who are unable to scale up or who are unable to expand their innovations and reach a larger share of the market. So the challenge is that these green solutions, that can help us achieve our climate targets. Two, that can help us explore our green growth potential. Most of these businesses are unable to scale up. So the challenge is that those who can help us meet our climate goals are unable to expand their innovations. And so our green growth potential may not be explored. And that is why it is very important for us to critically look at how do we get these businesses established right? How do we create the enabling environment for them so that they can meaningfully contribute to Ghana's climate action? And 2 or 3 reasons why this challenge persists in Africa is that, you see, green businesses, because they are bringing in or they are using innovative and environmentally sustainable solutions to produce, they have to bring in infrastructure. And typically, some of these infrastructure are high-cost infrastructure or expensive. And they also require relatively longer-term capital. But in Africa or in Ghana, that access to longer-term capital is not there. Capital is also expensive. So it makes it difficult for climate-smart businesses to expand or scale up. The other thing, too, is that the policy and the regulatory environment that needs to set up those restrictive and mandatory conditions that will create some sort of demand for climate-smart solutions or products and services. Those regulations are not there. And so these companies or these businesses are innovating, they're introducing solutions, but on the market side, there is no creation of economic incentive or demand for their product. And so it becomes very difficult for them to have a larger access to market. For that reason, they are unable to access longer-term capital. And for that, they can't also, because they can't have capital, they can't get the right infrastructure for them to scale up. And that is the reason why green businesses or green ventures in Africa are not doing well. And so this combination of factors are holding back a lot of green businesses from scaling up. And it is very important that as we embark on green growth or explore our green growth potential, we look at how do we address this. If we don't address this, we can put up the best NDCs, we can put up the best policies and solutions, but those who can actually bring in technology for you to address your greenhouse gas emissions, if we don't set them right, then we can't achieve our goals. And that is why IMANI is partnering with GCIC to critically look at the policy and the market gaps, how we can use policy to address it through advocacy and set this business right or create the enabling environment for green businesses. What we seek to achieve is that at the end of the day, the business environment is supportive for climate-smart businesses. If we get to that point where the business environment helps these businesses to scale up, we would have achieved our purpose. And so critically in this, we want to understand the concept of enabling environment. Even when we say enabling environment, what factors come together to form that enabling environment? Because if we can't define that enabling environment, then we can't use advocacy to get government to create that environment for green businesses. Then we identify the key factors that actually create that environment for you and also demonstrate how these factors work together to support or create a glass ceiling for green businesses. Then as part of the advocacy, how we can identify the key actors to support our advocacy work in driving home the need for enabling environment for green businesses. But at IMANI, when we are looking at issues, we realize that in creating the right business environment for green businesses, it is not only a market problem. It is critically more of a political economy problem. If the political economy accepts the need for green businesses, then we create the necessary policies and regulations that support them. So critically, what we look at in every research we do is that what are the political economy dimensions? And so we use the political economy analysis approach to examine every issue that we are looking at. And the aim is that beyond the technical analysis that we will be able to do, what are the political economy issues that may affect the creating of a green business environment? Critically, what are the embedded structural factors? How is the market structure or market and policy environment structured in a way that supports or serve as a barrier for green businesses? Then we look at what are the institutional factors, what are the current rules, regulations, policies, and other conditions in place that either support or affect the work of green businesses. What are the formal ones? What are the informal ones? How do they work together to affect green businesses? When we identify that, who are the key actors we must collaborate with? And part of identifying the actors is you that are in this room, where we, through advocacy, collaborate with you, push the conversation in creating that supportive environment, as well as government agencies that play a key role in delivering this enabling environment. If we put all of this together, then when we get to the policy recommendation session, we are able to specifically say that if you're able to do these factors, then we will be leading towards creating an enabling environment for green businesses. And the advantage of this approach is that you are able to know feasible solutions that can work, not just solutions that are abstract or may not be possible in our current policy environment. In terms of the concept of green business, in understanding what they are, there are two sides of looking at green business. One is these are businesses producing environmentally sustainable goods or services. And so when we say a green business or climate smart business, these are businesses that are committed to protecting the environment. And so the goods and services that they produce are sensitive or cognizant of the implication on the environment. Other side of it is these are businesses who may not be green or climate smart, but they are now integrating green solutions into their operations. And so when we are looking at green businesses, these are the two dimensions that we look at them. And the underlying idea of their business model is that they are not only concerned about the economic benefit of their business model, but they are concerned about the social and the environmental implications of the product and services that they deliver out. And because of that, that is the underlying difference between them and regular SMEs. While regular SMEs may look at the economic benefit alone, green businesses are looking at beyond the economic benefit, or their source of economic benefit is the environmental protection as well as social protection or social support. But in terms of the core underlying differences between them and traditional SMEs, it is built by three main factors. That is the value proposition, the value creation and delivery, and the value capture. These are the core factors that shape a business or that shapes a business model. If we say a company or an enterprise's business model, these are the key three things, and these are the key three things that distinguish green businesses from traditional SMEs. And in terms of value proposition, their aim, the value proposition critically is that why is the business there? And so their aim is to reduce environmental impact and increase business resilience by addressing the resource constraints and also resource constraints associated with non-renewable resources. But if you look at traditional SMEs, the focus is on maximizing product output and economic returns. In terms of value creation and delivery, the innovation through the induction of renewable resources in the product design, their aim in terms of how they create and deliver value is to integrate green solutions in their operations. But in the traditional business, it is the increased use of non-renewable resources. Then, in terms of how green businesses capture value, their revenues from new products and services are captured through a combination of both economic, environmental, and social value. So in terms of capturing and creating value, they look at the environmental effect, the social effect, as well as the economic issue. But if you look at the traditional businesses, they emphasize on economic returns. Because green businesses have focused on protecting the environment, they are focused on economic and social and governance issues, and their aim is to support environmental sustainability. And the business model that they apply, they cannot be treated the same way as traditional SMEs. Because in the case of traditional SMEs, there's no restrictions. But in green businesses, these are deliberate restrictions they are putting on themselves to introduce green solutions and technology. And for that matter, because those technologies and solutions are important for your green growth as well as your climate action, then it is important that in the middle, you create that enabling environment for them to be able to adopt those solutions and scale up those solutions. Because the two-way benefit is that they contribute to achieving environmental sustainability, create jobs, as well as overall contribute to your climate action goals. And that is why it is important that you create that enabling environment for them to be able to achieve that. And that is why we cannot consider green businesses the same as traditional SMEs. There's a sharp distinction between the two of them. And so the current policy environment cannot be the same way for green businesses. The key risk associated with going green is that, one, there's low consumer awareness and acceptance of green products, especially in Africa. When people are buying stuff, they don't first consider whether this is green or environmentally sustainable. Because of that, there's a relatively restricted access to market, or there's a relatively small market for them, or what we call fragmented market. They don't really have a large access to market like traditional SMEs. So typically, green businesses in Africa are like serving a specialized section of the population. So these are people who are conscious of environmental effect of product, who may consider green solutions. or these are businesses that are considering going green that may need the services and product of green business. Because of that, there's a very relatively small aspect of the market for them. Because they don't have a large access to market, and the other factor is that people's acceptance and awareness of environmental sustainability is not that high. Most people are not really conscious of climate change or environmental sustainability, despite the glaring impact of climate change. Because of that, most people do not actually go in for green product because they don't have that access, a large access to market. What happens is that they are unable to create large revenues. And that is why in the third slide that I showed, you could see that most of them are not scaling up because most green businesses are unable to make substantial revenues. Because they can't create very huge revenues, the financial products in the market are not supportive for them. Another aspect of it is that most of the products and services in the financial market are for short term. But green businesses, their market and revenues actually happen in the long term. They're able to, in the long term, they're able to generate more market and more revenue. But because the financial solutions are meant for short term, there is that contradiction. And so they are unable to access the solutions in the financial market. And because they can't have access to financial resources, they can't scale up. But the other thing that is holding all of these problems together is that unsupportive legislative and regulatory measures. The regulations that we have and the laws that we have, they do not create mandatory demand for green products and services. So when we pass an emissions levy, does it make it compelling for people to start pursuing electric vehicles? It doesn't make it. If we have environmental excise tax that charges a tax on plastic product, does that make it mandatory or compelling for people to start looking for eco-friendly products? So that is the challenge with our regulatory environment for green businesses. They don't create a mandatory demand or need for green products. Again, it does not create the economic incentive for people to invest in green products because the market is very fragmented, or it's for a relatively smaller group of people who are more environmentally conscious. And so if you are investing in such business as a financial institution, your first concern is their market and their revenue and their cash flow. And because of all of these factors, they're able to show that like the traditional business. And that is why we need to create that enabling environment for them so that if the environment is supportive, they can access financial solutions. When the environment creates the need and demand for green products, they are able to also get a larger access to market, raise more revenue, and explore different solutions that can help them to scale up. And that is why when businesses choose to go green, and they are very relevant to our climate action goals, it is important that we are conscious of the business environment that we are creating for them. Now, we come to the key drivers. One of the issues that we want to understand is that what are the key things that come together to form that supportive environment? The last time we did a presentation to a government agency, one of the questions someone asked is that every time you keep hearing enabling environment, what is our own perception of enabling environment? And so here, what we're actually doing is that we explore through the green business literature to identify across Africa and the globe, what are the key factors that are driving green business investment? In every country where you go to, you should be able to find these factors as enabling solutions to green businesses. And the first one is a long-term decarbonization strategy. The reason why a country needs a long-term decarbonization strategy is that it sets a long-term strategic path for the country that this is where we want to get to. These are the green technologies we need to get to this level of environmental sustainability. And so if these are the technologies that we need to get there, who are the people who have those technologies? That will be the green businesses. The next thing is that how do we create a supportive environment within policy and regulation so that they can adopt and scale up those technologies? But if the country doesn't have a long-term decarbonization plan, the challenge is that they don't know where they are going to in terms of greenhouse gas emission reduction. There's no strategic plan. Because of that, they don't also know what are the inherent green growth potentials in the country and the technologies that can bring those green growth potential. But when the country has a long-term decarbonization plan, they know the path to reducing emission, they know the technology they want to adapt, as well as the solutions that must be present so that those technologies can be adapted. And if you reflect this in Ghana's setting, Ghana's long-term decarbonization plan is what we call the Nationally Determined Contribution, as well as the Energy Transition and Investment Plan. It set a long-term plan for how we want to reduce greenhouse gas emission. And inherent in that, there are 6 technologies that are the focus of that decarbonization strategy. And inside the nationally determined contribution, we've set specific activities we want to do to get there. And so we know if this is what we want to get to reducing emissions and leverage more of our green growth potential, then we should know what are the enabling or supportive policies we should put in place so that these green businesses can be able to bring in those technologies, adapt, and also scale up. The other issue that you find everywhere is fiscal policy. Fiscal policy is basically how government makes revenue and spend the revenue. In the first work that we did with GCIC, we were able to show in a compelling way how the existing fiscal policies we have can be used to support green businesses. And one of such is the taxes. It's either you use the taxes to raise revenue to support green businesses, or you use the taxes to create an economic incentive or demand for green products and services. And so if you pass something like a pollution and sanitation and pollution levy, what that sanitation and pollution levy can do is that it can be a pool of revenue that you use to support green businesses, or it can create a mandatory need for green products and services. And so if a particular business is emitting or is producing a particular level of greenhouse gases or carbon emission, because of that pollution, you charge them this sanitation and pollution levy. And that becomes mandatory for that business to go and look for a company that is selling green solutions and integrate those solutions. In that way, you've created a demand for green businesses. But if you reflect these fiscal policies in Ghana, most of the fiscal policies, that's the taxes that are meant to support environmental sustainability, they are only revenue mobilization tools. They are only designed to make revenue. They are not designed to actually support green businesses. For example, if you look at the environmental excise tax, that is an excise tax on plastic products. This revenue is supposed to go into establishing a plastic authority that will now create a supportive environment for those involved in recycling. But since that law was passed for more than 10 years ago, that authority has not been set up. Even the revenues have never been used to support green businesses. And in 2017, when we passed the Earmark Funds and Capping Act, that particular instrument was also capped. And so now revenues that go into that particular, revenues that come from the environmental excise tax, they are capped. There's a level that can go into that pot, but the excess goes into support government activities. And so most of these tools are meant for revenue mobilization. For example, if you look at the emissions levy that has been passed, it is only a revenue mobilization tool. It does not create any demand or an economic incentive for any green business to say that I'm going in to introduce these green technologies, or as a company, I will start pursuing or buying more green products and services. And so fiscal policies can be used in a way to support green businesses, but in our context, it is not used in that regard. Then another thing that is coming up so strong is green public procurement. Government is one of the largest spenders in every country. In sub-Saharan Africa, at least in 2022, the World Bank estimates that most of the countries in sub-Saharan Africa, they spend about 17% of their public, 17% of their public procurement budget is about, 17% of GDP is equivalent to how much they spend on public procurement. So if you look at their procurement budget, how much their procurement of goods, works, and services, it is equivalent to about 17% of their GDP. So if you take Ghana, for instance, averagely, our procurement, if you take out interest payment and compensation, is equivalent to between 15% to 17% of GDP. Because government is one of the biggest spenders, it is important that they are also cognizant of environmental sustainability. And because of that, green public procurement has become a tool where government procurement have now been used to support or create a demand for green businesses. So what now governments do is that in their purchase of goods, services, and works, they are conscious about how this thing that we are purchasing or procuring support environmental sustainability. And because of that, most government agencies in developed economies are now buying more from green businesses. By using green public procurement, you create a demand for green products and services. But in Ghana, even though there's sustainable procurement in our Procurement Act, it is never applied. At least last year, there was a conversation around integrating environmental sustainability in our public procurement, but that has not been achieved. Another thing that you also see is direct policy interventions, where there is direct intervention by government that we are creating this intervention to support these green technologies or these solutions. And so most governments are creating deliberate policy interventions to support their green growth. A typical example is the EU Green Deal. And in the European Union Green Deal, they specifically state even the conditions that must be present for a business to be called green. Two, they also state mandatory conditions on businesses to integrate green solutions in their businesses. For example, if the EU Green Deal is fully passed into legislation and member states can start implementing it, there is about a tax of almost 800 euros per ton of plastic pollution that will be implemented in EU member states. What they are trying to do is that now businesses that purchase plastic products will now be environmentally conscious and sensitive. So they are creating a need and demand for green businesses. That is one direct policy intervention. Another one is the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, the CBAM. What the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism seeks to do is that they know that when you impose some of these policy measures in Europe or other developed economies, they may shift their supply chain to other countries where environmental sustainability issues are not very strict. So what the CBAM seeks to do is that where you import and export to, we are going to charge you the carbon emission of that total export. So there are specific taxes on even the carbon emission of that export or import that you are doing, which means that the businesses in the European Union will now start buying from manufacturers or businesses whose activities are environmentally sustainable. When you do these things, you create a need for green businesses. And that is what we call the economic incentive that you create for a private investor to now go and invest in green solutions. And that is what we think that should be done. Reflecting in our context, what we see is that there are a lot of policy measures, but the policy measures available on climate change issues are not sensitive or did not conceive green businesses in thinking. If you look at the policy imaginations that went into the National Climate Change Policy, the Environmental Protection Act. That is because at the time of conceptualizing most of the policies, there was no consciousness of climate-smart businesses. So there are no provisions in those policies that are supportive of climate-smart businesses. And so they are bringing in these innovations, they are going into climate-smart agriculture, but there is no policy that is creating a need for their products and services. And that is the challenge within our policy context. Then environmental standards and labeling. Let me even talk about sustainable financing. I've already mentioned that if you look at the green business model that we discussed, that they are integrating green solutions, and some of these green solutions are capital intensive. And because they are capital intensive, they will need financing. But the financing that they need is not like what a traditional business will need. What green businesses actually need is that because they make a larger market and revenue in the long term, their financing too should reflect their business model. So what that means is that the financing that they get should actually be long-term sustainable financing, what we call the perma-cap. That's the permanent capital. It is not capital that comes in to support them 1 year, 2 years, but capital that goes in relatively longer so that by the time they start making revenues, they will now be building debt credibility so that they will be able to pay their capital because they make more revenue and more market access in the long term. But the market for financing available now are always for short term because in the determination of financing solutions for SMEs, most of the financial institutions consider green businesses as traditional SMEs. And that is why there are a lot of loan facilities or credit facilities available for private sector. But these green businesses cannot tap in because their business model doesn't make that financing very sustainable. Another challenge too is that if you look at the domestic credit available to private sector in Ghana, Ghana has one of the lowest levels. If you compare us to South Africa, Kenya, and Nigeria, we are a bit at par with Nigeria. But while other countries have about the domestic credit provided by banks that are available to private sector is about 40% of their GDP. In Ghana, it's around 22% of our GDP. And so it tells you that if a green business is in Kenya or South Africa, they are more exposed to capital than a green business that is in Ghana. So that is the challenge. So these factors combine with the short-term nature of financing and make it difficult for green businesses to access financing. Then environmental standards and labeling. So there are a lot of environmental labeling that green businesses must even get to prove that they are green. So, for example, if someone produces an eco-friendly product, they have to now go to Ghana Standards Authority, FDA, or other regulators, EPA, to get a certificate or a license that show that they are actually green or environmentally sustainable. But someone in a traditional business doesn't need all of that. And that is why you need to support green business. But the challenge with even the labeling is that in other countries, they do the labeling to create a need and demand for green businesses. But here, there is no consumer awareness and consciousness of some of these labels. So if I'm buying something in a shop and I see a label around it, there is no sensitization and consciousness for the consumers to now look for products that are environmentally sustainable. So climate-smart agricultural producers are producing environmentally sustainable mushroom. But when it gets onto the shelf, the labels that are on it, because people don't understand it, they don't see the need to go for those products. That is why environmental standards and labeling, they are important for green businesses. But if you reflect it in our context, that labeling and standardization are not accompanied by consumer awareness and sensitization. So in Europe and America and other countries, when people are buying stuff, they just pick and look at what is the carbon emission, what is the even environmental sustainability level of this plastic? Is it biodegradable? Is it that? Is it that? But here, there is no consciousness of that. So when people get into shop, they are not actually moved to go for green product, or even in terms of looking for green product and service. So these factors, if they are present in a country, they create a need and a supportive environment for green businesses. But if they are not implemented appropriately, they then even become a barrier for green businesses. One of the things that we're also looking at is that even in sustainable financing, another thing that has come up is innovative financing. So today, in financing green businesses, it is not only going for credit lines or loans from financial institutions, but there's a combination of financing that is supporting climate change. And one of them is that most of the climate solutions or green business solutions, they are not financed by loans from financial institutions. They are actually equity, concessional financing, project-level debt. And so if you're a green business in a country, you must create that policy support so that green businesses can actually go in for some of these innovative financing. So if it is debt or project-level debt, as a country, you must create the supportive environment to keep your interest rate relatively lower so that if they are combining project-level debt with other financial institutions' loan, when they come together, your interest rate will be able to neutralize other interest rate and create a stable interest rate and supportive environment for them. But another thing that has come up so strongly is that if you look at around the world, most green businesses are actually being financed by impact investors. Impact investors have taken a strong need or a strong interest in green businesses. And when they took that strong interest in green businesses, they are actually looking at sub-Saharan Africa. So if you look at the last 10 years, most of the impact investment around the world, most of them went to sub-Saharan Africa. Most of them actually went to sub-Saharan Africa and developing economy, because in these developing economies, they have a lot more green business potential because most people do not have access to electricity. That is solar power and renewable energy technology market. In these countries, waste management is not done appropriately. So that is recycling and circular economy business opportunities in those countries. In those developing economies, what you see is that most people do not have access to clean cooking technologies. That is a business opportunity for clean cooking solutions. And so when impact investors are going around and they are looking for investment, they look at countries where there's one, a business potential, and two, there's a future potential need, because as climate and environmental sustainability issues are being emphasized around the world, it is going to put a lot of pressure on government to start implementing measures, and that will create some sort of need for these green solutions. And that's why impact investors have taken so much need in green businesses, and most of them is coming to Africa. Now, when you look at the barriers to enabling business environment, they can be grouped under 4 main themes. So we've looked at the factors, if they are present, can be supportive. But if you look at the barriers to green business investment, there are 4 main factors: the market barriers, finance barriers, knowledge and technology, and policy and legal. I think by this time, I've already overly emphasized on how some of these things serve as a barrier. Now, they don't have a huge market access because their market is fragmented. There's a low consumer awareness, and so most people are actually not going after green products and services. And we are not even using public procurement to create a demand for them, and that is a market barrier. But the factors are interlinked. When there are market barriers, that means that in the long term or the medium to long term, their revenue potential and cash flow potentials are challenged. That means that in country, they can't access the financial solutions available, and they will have to now look externally. And after this presentation, if you ask most of the green businesses here, most of their financing are coming from either donor support or external financing. That is because of this market barrier, making it difficult for them to access the financing solution. Another factor is that in our market, interest rates are relatively higher. So given that they make revenues actually in the medium to long term, it is a disincentive for them to now go for interest rate about 40%, when a green business in America or in Europe may be doing something around 1.5 or 2%. Another challenge that we also see is that this is the graph I was talking about. So if you look around Africa, what the World Bank estimates is that they look at the capital that banks make available to the private sector, and they estimate it against your GDP. So if you look at a country like South Africa, they are doing averagely about 60% of their GDP. So the capital available to private sector is about 60% of their GDP. So if there's a green business in South Africa, their exposure to capital availability is much higher than a country or a green business in Nigeria or Ghana. If you look at even more sub-Saharan Africa, coming down to Kenya, Kenya is doing averagely around between 30 and 40%. But if you come to Ghana, gradually the amount of capital banks make available to private sector is declining. And that is because of the market conditions or macroeconomic challenges that we have faced over the last decade or over the last 10 years. Because of that, in the market, they don't have access, or they are not even exposed to so much capital. The interest rate is already higher, and the financial solutions in the market are not cognizant of the business model of green businesses. So some of them do not have deliberate products that are meant to support climate-smart enterprises. And the other challenge is the policy and legal regulatory issues. And the main issue there is that the laws and the policies and the regulations are not creating, one, an economic incentive for people to go into green businesses. Two, they are not creating a demand for green products and services. So it becomes difficult for these businesses to now scale up and innovate. And so these factors combine. Then the last factor is the knowledge and technology barriers. Because green businesses are actually adopting green solutions or renewable energy solutions, or let's say climate-sensitive solutions, sometimes some of this infrastructure or technology require highly skilled labor. But if you bring it in our context, sometimes the skills level of the employees available is not up to sometimes the technologies that are used by green business. So the risk is that they have to now retrain people to understand how to use some of those solutions. In our engagement with green businesses, someone made a statement, and it is interesting. He said he's into climate-smart agriculture. He said you hire someone to come and help you. You show them the standards of applying specific chemicals or agricultural products. If they are supposed to do 10 acres, they get on the field and do 3 acres and come back. They lack skills in terms of, or they don't have the skills and the competencies to actually get into some of or to use some of those technologies. They take some green technologies onto the field, they come back, they are unable to handle it. And so one other problem that the businesses even see is that the level of skills and competencies of employees is relatively low, and so they have to always retrain people to learn some of these skills. So if in an economy, there are finance barriers, difficulties in accessing finance, and that businesses are unable to even leverage innovative financing, and there are market barriers, and this combined with your policy and legal barriers and the knowledge and technology barriers. And another thing on the technology barrier is that some of these technologies are expensive. So someone is doing recycling, but there's a technology that can help them produce even much more product, but it's expensive, so they can't buy them. But when all of these factors combine, then they create a glass ceiling for most African green businesses. And that is why we are seeing a spring up of a lot of green businesses in Africa, but most of them are not scaling up. Most of them are not scaling up because of all of these challenges in the market. And if you don't address this, what that means is that we will not be able to leverage our green growth potential. That means that the target we have set for ourselves to achieve in the nationally determined contribution by 2030, we won't be able to achieve it. That also means that a lot more people are going to be exposed to the effect and impact of climate change. And that is why green businesses are so important. Another fact is that in Ghana, most non-household establishments, over 95% of them, most non-household establishments, that is any establishment that is not a household-based one or that's a business, most of them are SMEs. Most of them are SMEs. And most of these green businesses in Ghana or across Africa are SMEs. So if these barriers affect SME development, then that also means that they may also affect these green businesses' ability to scale up and introduce more solutions that help us achieve our climate target. All we need is for them to scale up. But the current challenge in the market, they will not be able to do that. And so, beyond that, in terms of what government can do, there is a bit of work also for the green businesses also to do. In terms of creating an enabling environment, even though government has the greatest work to do, there is a bit of work also for green businesses. The first is that green businesses must be set up right. As part of an enabling environment, one of them is that they must be set up right. They must have the managerial as well as a bit of management competencies, or must be set up like a business. If you have a green business innovation and you've not registered that business and you've not done all your regulatory compliance certifications, it is very difficult to attract even financial investment. And so another thing is that green businesses must be set up right. Then green businesses must establish all the managerial attitudes, as I said, to foster collaboration with government. So the last time we did some work on climate financing, the challenge that government agencies raise is that sometimes climate finance come in, but no green businesses or none of these climate-sensitive agencies are able to tap in. Is that when they raise the compliance requirement for those financing, most of the businesses do not have those compliance mechanisms. And so even the financial institutions that are managing some of our climate funds, one of their major challenges is that the compliance measures around the funds, when you present it to the businesses, most of them are not do not qualify, or they are not compliant to some of those measures. And so green businesses must start looking into the space. What are some of the innovative financing solutions coming? What are some of the managerial requirements, so that they set up around those requirements and makes them or expose them more to some of those solutions? Then they must build capacity to explore innovative financing. And I've said this over and over because it is becoming the most important thing around green business conversations in the world, that if you are only going to rely on capital from banks, you will not be able to scale up. Because if you operate in a country like Africa or in a country like Ghana, where interest rates can get to about 37%, that means that you will never be able to access capital. But now, you should be able to create the business in a way that it can leverage on innovative financing. So in one financing instrument, you can bring together impact investors, you can have equity investors, you can have maybe project-level debt into it. On all of this, that's when you put it together, we call them blended finance. So you're able to blend a lot of financial solutions to execute a particular project. Then you must build partnership with stakeholders. So if you're a green business, don't live on an island. One thing is that you must build collaborations in the ecosystem. You exist in an ecosystem with donors, with investors from within or outside your country. You're also within that with government and other impact investors. So you must build collaboration with those people within your ecosystem. Another factor too is that if you are a green business and you're operating, you must start exploring innovative collaborations like mergers. So if you are into recycling, another person is into recycling, if you look at your production potential when you merge and it is more financially sustainable, it is better to explore some things like mergers and acquisition. And we've seen some of those things happening around the world, where some small-scale green businesses are acquired by relatively larger ones, or where small-scale green businesses also merge to form a relatively bigger one. What that does is that it increases your financing potentials. It also increases your market reach and revenue potentials. And so those are some of the innovative things that on the green businesses side, when they do, it contributes to what government does to create that enabling environment. When we engage green businesses, what we actually saw is that in terms of their experiences on the barriers, on the market barriers, most of them, one of the things that they say is a lack of support from the business resource centers. You know, under Ghana Enterprise Agency, there are business resource centers across the country that are supposed to provide some technical and managerial support or capacity building for these businesses. But currently in our engagement, these BRCs also charge for their services. And so some of the businesses cannot even afford it, or they will not be able to access it. Hitherto, it used to be free. Then unstable macroeconomic issues, low consumer awareness and economic incentive. These are the experiences combining to create the market barriers. On the financing side, I've already mentioned the short-term nature of the financing, the high cost of financing, low capacity to undertake innovative financing. One of the issues that when we engage, they said is that they are aware of the innovative financing solutions available, but the capacity to actually put together some of these structures is difficult. Another thing too is that some of them even rely on external people to help them manage some of their accounting and other solutions. And so they need some support in terms of building these innovative solutions. And these are the experiences. But most of the challenge lies within the policy, legal, and regulatory barriers, because that is the main thing that sets the stage for them. But if these barriers are there, and one of the issues they raise is the compliance and regulatory fees. So most of these businesses are working on being compliant and setting themselves up right, but the bureaucratic process they go through to get this certification, and not just the delays, the cost of compliance. So for example, someone who is into small-scale solar PV installation, now as part of their registration, they pay an annual fee of about 5,200. And in the past, you pay about 5,000 to be registered as an installer. Then every year you renew your certificate about 3,000. But now there's nothing like that. Every year they have to renew at a rate of about 5,000. That is expensive. Some of them too go through this regulatory process, and because there are delays, you have to now be either paying unofficial fees to get your certification, or sometimes you don't even get it. But even when they need this certification to prove that they are sustainable businesses. But if we create more delays in the process for them, then it becomes very difficult for these businesses. And another issue is the absence of strong policies. The policies in the business environment are not really designed to create a need for them. And so it makes it difficult for them to have a larger market access and also scale up. Then I've mentioned the high certification cost, then higher tax regime. And we illustrate this. This is the value chain of a solar PV installation. And this is the number of taxes that you will pay when you want to get into this business. So most of the solar PV installation value chain, it starts with importing the solar PV, because most of the solar PVs are not produced here. The ones that are produced domestically, they can't go beyond 400 megawatts. And so if you are doing installation and it goes beyond 400 megawatts, it means you can't source locally. So most of them import them. And these are the number of taxes that you pay at the port. These are the number of taxes you pay. And another challenge here is that we have a policy that should support solar PV installation. But the challenge with that policy is that if you import, you get the tax rebate if you import them as a system. That means that the PV, batteries, and inverter, everything together. But most of these businesses source their product from different parts of the world. So you go and you import battery, you have to pay the tax. You go and import inverter, you import the solar PV panels. But if these policies are implemented right, even if I'm importing only the PV, I should get the tax rebate. But today, the challenge that the businesses share is that if you don't import together as a system, then you'll not be able to enjoy the tax rebate. That is because the custom officers are not sensitized to understand that if you say a solar PV system, these are the things that come together to make it. And so the tax rebate should apply. But this is the level of tax you pay them. Now, when you come to creating the system size and also going to do the installation for people, you have to now pay GET Fund, NHIS, VAT, and COVID levy. So at every stage of the value chain, you are paying some higher taxes. And that means that it makes green products and services expensive. It makes it expensive compared to anybody who will set up a bakery that will rely on LPG. But if you set up a bakery and you want to rely on some of your energy from solar PV, this makes it a bit expensive for you to use those solutions. Then the challenge on the technology and knowledge barriers, I've already mentioned. High cost of energy makes it difficult for them to even bring in more innovative technology solutions. Then high cost of the technology itself, the technologies that they use in their green business activities, it's very expensive. For example, if you do a solar PV irrigation and you have a very large farm, you can imagine how much you have to invest in solar PV irrigation. So what we are saying is that Ghana has enormous green business potential. And another positive thing is that there's a high political support for green businesses in the country, for climate change and environmental sustainability. So there's a high political support for climate change issues because it's become a big thing around the globe, and Ghana has committed to all forms of declarations. But the challenge is that the policies are not reflecting the political support. The policies are not reflecting that kind of support for climate change and environmental sustainability. And so a blend of these market barriers, financing, and technology and policy issues create a glass ceiling that makes it difficult for green businesses in Ghana to scale up. And the challenge that is in Ghana are kind of the same across Africa. So by way of recommendation, what we are proposing is that a 5-point recommendation is that we must develop and implement a coherent climate change policy framework. A climate change policy framework that is cognizant of the underlying issues of green businesses and create the needed policy support for them. Then let's streamline our regulatory and compliance process. If you look at most of the challenges that they raise, you see compliance issues as one of the major challenges that they face in the market. And so we must streamline that. We digitize some compliance processes, but it's still not reflecting. Then we must use existing policies and regulations to create an economic need for green businesses. Then let's increase consumer awareness and knowledge of green products and services. Again, green businesses also must enhance their capacity to explore innovative financing. Then we must create regulatory support for critical green technologies. So in our energy transition and investment framework, the technologies that we identify as key to our green growth, let's create enabling policies for them so that green businesses can adopt these solutions, and that when they're able to do all of that, they contribute immensely to your nationally determined contribution. So these are our key policies that we are proposing that if government implement, we will be making a way in addressing the challenges to green businesses. So thank you very much, and I'm grateful for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dennis, for that comprehensive presentation. Let's put our hands together once again for Dennis.